Alright, so the way that this manual choke works is you've got this actual knob right here, or you pull out. When you pull out, it pulls up on this piece of wire, and this piece of wire is hooked with a screw to this part of the linkage right here. So what happens is when you pull up on this, it pulls up this linkage and closes the chokes. Now the reason why they use this flexible wire instead of a linkage is because if they used a rigid linkage, what would happen is the auto or the electric choke right here wouldn't be able to pull up, because this would be attached to a linkage that didn't want to move, because this knob is designed to have a kind of a friction fit in here. So what happens is if you get this choke in the off position and then the electric choke wants to work, all that happens is this wire will just end up flexing like this. So it's a pretty simple design. So what I got to do is I got to figure out the length of that wire, because there was only a little piece of it left on this thing. The rest of it was trashed. So I'm just going to temporarily hold this up into position, and we'll run this wire down here. And I know that I gotta leave a little bit of room for the crimp connector. Alright, I'll just strip that off. Now to attach this end of the my little linkage here, to attach this end to the plastic linkage, I'm going to use this screw. I'm going to use this self-locking nylon bushed nut, and the reason why I want to do that is because I don't want to tighten this screw too tight, because then it won't swivel, and if I leave the nut loose, I run the risk of it basically falling off at some point. So by using this type of a deal here, yeah, this is a pain. I should put this side on first. Okay, there we go. So now, when this is bolted into position, you'll see when I pull this up, it's going to pull that choke closed. And then when I push it down, it's going to let that choke go back down. That's the deal there. Alright, so what I did on this side is I've reattached this bracket, and I've installed my new jumper cable, ground jumper lead from the this bracket here on the distributor, the stop bracket or whatever you want to call this. And my tape's coming off. It's all that twisting of the cable. That's some quality tape there. Alright, so I got that mounted correctly, I believe. The cable, the old cable was just loose, and half of it was attached here, and the other half was just loose. But from what I gather, I think it's this bolt here that it was supposed to attach to. Over here on this side, I've attached my new ground cable that goes from this bolt here over to the starter. And I've got my, of course, I've got my new choke, manual choke cable rigged up. That's working well. This, now that this bracket's mounted correctly in position, you can see that this broken wire that's sitting right here actually just reaches over right to the electric choke solenoid connection. So I know without a doubt now that that's certainly was the wire that went there. Goes through this clamp, and then this is where I think I broke or cut it off right here, where it went to the horrible, what was left of the wiring harness. So that looks good. I haven't put this back cover on yet. I'm going to make sure I have the spark plug, at least the number 6 spark plug in before I put that back cover on, because that's going to be, with that back cover on, it's going to be a bear getting a wrench in there to tighten that number 6 spark plug. So I'm going to turn my attention now to resurrecting the wiring harness, and I also got to, I've got the parts now, a couple of things that I needed to put together the quick disconnect fuel connector, because that's kind of, again, I had this ignition coil in here just temporarily because it actually, the long bolt that goes through the base of the ignition coil goes through that quick disconnect. Alright, so I've got what I believe I'm going to need to put this back together. I'm reusing this stem because it's no longer available. The O-ring that was on here, I actually have what's left of it right here. It's hard as a rock and it just crumbles in my fingers. I went to an industrial supply house in the city, and they sized me an O-ring for this. So I already have the new O-ring installed, and this basic, I already cleaned this out. So this just drops in like this, okay. And this is my original spring, and it's got quite a bit of rust on it, so I didn't want to use that. The spring is still available. Could have ordered it online. I think they're $2.99 and then shipping. But my local marine dealer had one left on the shelf, new old stock, and he gave it to me for $2, so that was a good deal there. He had said that pretty much all of these parts are going away because they expect you to just replace this as an assembly. They do have the assembly in stock at the Mercury dealer. These are $30. So I'm again, in the interest of minimizing what I'm spending on this motor, because I haven't even heard it run yet, I did not want to spend $30 on one of these. As it is, I'm probably going to run this off of a small auxiliary tank and not through this fitting just yet. I'll worry about this later. So the reality is that even if this little rebuild here fails to work correctly, if I find out that everything else with the motor is looking good, then I can always buy one of these and install it later. So this spring, the other component to this is this little cup, which I clean this one up and I'm going to reuse it because this is also no longer available. But the wide end of the spring is going to sit in the cup. Just drops down in there like this. Alright, now what holds this all in there, okay, is your fitting. Now what was coming off of here, of course, was a fitting like this, okay, and I don't know if you guys recall, it was quite a few episodes ago that I was showing that what apparently had happened on this thing is that this isn't the original fuel fitting. I've already thrown that away, but this end of the fuel fitting must have been dry rotted, and what somebody did was they cut off the end and put on not one but two hose clamps to make up for the fact that the hose was leaking at the end there, to try and stop a leak without having to replace the whole line. What that had done was that had made the line shorter, and because the fitting was the line was coming straight out of the back of the fitting like this, and because it was now short, they were having to pull this up, and it was causing this line to be kinked pretty badly there, which caused a flow restriction. So that's not good. Well, interestingly enough, so now that I want to convert this to barbed fittings and regular hoses and clamps, I got my barbed fitting here and I've got an adapter. Okay. Interestingly enough, though, that's still going to come straight out the back. Okay, so I could make the line longer so I can have it loop a little more gracefully and avoid the kinking problem. But what I noticed in a video that I had watched, somebody working on one of these, that they had a 90-degree fitting on the back of theirs. Now, I don't know whether or not that was stock. I think that model that he was working on was a 1976 model. So I don't know whether or not the orientation of the fuel lines changed or what, but I've been looking at the way this is in there, and I'm thinking that's probably what I want to do, is I'll put a 90-degree elbow on here. So I've got this fitting right here. The beauty of this is this will thread right in here, okay, and give me a 90-degree. But upon closer inspection of this fitting, I'm not really thrilled about the fact that you're probably not going to be able to see on the camera, but down inside there's a very small orifice. In other words, you can see how large this is, relatively speaking. But I can see down inside there, and I don't like the looks of that. So again, worried about flow, because I have a feeling that these triple carburetors on this 115 horsepower motor are going to really they're going to be thirsty, and they're going to really want to gobble up some fuel at wide open throttle. So I think I don't want to go with that. So what I've decided I'm going to do instead is I'm going to go with, I have this elbow, but this elbow is the wrong size to thread into here. That's that opening's every bit as good as that opening. So I'm going to put a reduction bushing in that'll allow me to put this elbow on, that will then allow me to put this barbed fitting on. So I'm going to have something like this coming out of the back of this thing, and it looks like I'll have room in there to put this whole thing in there. And then that line now will be able to come up and already start coming upwards, and then just kind of have to make a slight loop or turn to go to the fuel pump. So I think this is going to be the way to go. Alright, so here's my finished product there, and actually I think it's going to work quite well. I just did a quick test. Don't do drugs. Alright, I don't have this sticking straight up. It's actually tilted a little bit back this way because I think that's going to work out well. And I've already attached the line on because it's going to be almost impossible to tighten that clamp down once it's down inside there. And I'm actually going to, this is going to have to eventually come up to here on the fuel pump. For the time being, I'm going to leave it undone because I'm going to hook a piece of line onto here and have a small tank rigged up to gravity feed for my initial start. So now I got to get this down in. This is by no means an easy thing to do. Come on. I'm going to loosen up that back bolt so that I can tilt this up a little bit and get that under there. Alright, so my tip to anybody doing this would be if you're going to put that, take that fuel thing out and put it back in again, leave your ignition coil pack out until you're ready to do that, And unfortunately, the ignition coil pack here is so tight up against the bottom of the rectifier here that if I wanted to take it out completely, I'd have to unbolt all of this that I just finished bolting up. But as luck would have it, it turns out if I take out this front screw and loosen up all the bolts, I can shift it just out of the way enough to get the inner bolt in, which is the one I was having trouble with. Well, first I had trouble with the outer one. Then I got the outer one in and realized I couldn't get the inner one in. So I realized I got to do them inner one first, then outer one. And now I've dropped one of the spacers, and because it's aluminum, I can't pick it up with my magnet. Come on. Uh-oh. Where'd that just roll to? No, no, no. Motor's tilted this way, so when I just lost it and it rolled away, I panicked, only to find out that it actually rolled all the way over to this side where there's plenty of room to get my fingers in there and get it out. How do you like that? Battery cable is in the way. This bolt on the back side holds the solenoid in. There's going to be a bear to get at, so I'm just going to loosen it, tilt the solenoid up out of the way, like so. Pull the offending bolt out. Get the spacer in. Reinsert the bolt. Get the bolt going through everything. Oh yeah. Now we're cooking. Okay, the two bolts that hold the hold this cream puff in, this fuel thing in, they actually go through the bottom of the cowling and then have to pass through this bracket and then have a couple of nuts on them. Getting both of them started before I even bother trying to tighten one of them. Okay, get this front spacer in. Front mounting screw goes back in. Yeah, I know I just tightened this one, but I gotta loosen it a little bit because I can't get this hole to line up. There we go, just a little bit. Yeah, I know. You know what it is? It's a large Phillips head screw, and it's because of the angle it's at there, it's kind of hard to get in straight onto the head with it. So it's a big, beefy screw head, plenty of stuff to grab onto with the pliers. So just tighten it down with that. Yep, not going to get into the Mechanics Hall of Fame with that one. Which I gotta take my extension off to get the socket on that one. Which I still can't get that on there. Oh, you know what? I think that nut is captive. I don't think I need to hold the bottom of that nut. I think I just need to push my... Oh, look at that! I didn't even realize that. This side of the ignition coil bracket's actually not even a... I could have taken the coil out completely without taking that nut out. Oh, duh! Now I got a lot more access, at least to that back bolt, if nothing else. Of course, now that I'm done getting those all tightened in there. Nice going, Walt. I think I'm not going to throw this solenoid back in there just yet, because have yet another. I wonder if I can run this behind here. That's going to go there eventually. I have another conundrum, or another fun thing to get in, which is this right here. Oh, that back on my new fuel line fittings, they stick out kind of far. I hope I have the clearance. And where is this piece of heaven here? Needs to go in here like this. Ah, yeah. And there's a clamp that goes on top of it that actually keeps it in place. And I actually think it's going to be fine. But this is not ready yet. This I have to do a little bit of magic to this.